Great. Well, thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for your interest in participating in tonight's virtual community meeting to discuss the city's housing element update. My name is Tony Boo. I'm one of the senior planners here at the City of El Monte, and I'm also joined with other city staff. We have Jason McCallion, Deputy Director of Community and Economic Development, with us, and also providing translations. We have Alejandro De La Huera, planning technician, who's able to provide Spanish translation, and Jessica Chan, senior administrative assistant, who is able to provide Cantonese translations tonight. And tonight, our consultants are also here with us, who will present on the city's housing element update efforts. We're here with Diane Bathgate, project manager with RM Design Group, and also Rachel Rayner, associate planner with RRM Design Group. And we can start by handing off the presentation to Ms. Diane Bathgate.
Great, thank you so much, Tony. And again, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Really appreciate you spending a little bit of time to learn about the housing element update and provide, we're looking forward to hearing some comments as we progress through our presentation. And at the end, we'll have an open forum where we can have open-ended questions and more of a dialogue. But as Tony mentioned, RM Design Group, our team has been retained by the city, complemented by Veronica Tam and Associates as well. So we're working collaboratively with city staff and the community to update the housing element, and this is part of that process. Next slide. So most folks may be familiar with the Zoom platform that we're using tonight for the workshop, but just for orientation, we have the, you can mute or unmute. There's also video, but during the presentation, we ask that you keep your mic on mute. And then toward the end of the meeting, then we'll have opportunity for, again, open-ended questions during a breakout session, an open forum where we have a few questions to ask. And for any other feedback that we don't cover through a few of the questions, we have about 8 polling questions throughout the presentation. And for things that you want to elaborate on or offer other input, we'll have that opportunity as well. We'll have the chat function open during the presentation, and feel free to include questions or comments during the presentation, and we'll pause periodically to help answer questions, or we can also answer those at the end of the presentation. So those are 2 options. We ask that you not use the raise hand function during the presentation, but that might be a good tool toward the end of the meeting when we do have that open forum. Thank you, Rachel. So for tonight, the agenda, the topics are just introductions as we've just conducted. We wanted to provide some background information on what is the housing element, especially for folks that might not have been involved in the previous housing element or are typically involved in city planning processes. We'll have an overview of the housing element process, and that includes some highlights on demographics and statistics describing El Monte today. Also, we'll be talking about the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, or RHNA, which some folks may already be familiar with, but it's a housing target allocation that this comes down from the state. And then part of that is looking at the site's inventory analysis. What are the opportunity areas for potential future housing? And then we'll summarize some of the next steps in the process. And then we'll have really just one breakout room, one forum where we have some open-ended questions and we can continue the conversation. Thank you, Rachel. We have about 8 questions, and we are using a platform called slido.com. And to participate in these polling questions, you can type in under option 1 slido.com, and the specific survey identifier is the # El Monte HEU, or you can use the QR code, the symbol on the right, if you have a smartphone, to connect with the Slido poll. Some pretty simple polling questions, but we hope you can take a moment to get oriented and get that up on your phone or computer. You can enter Slido, SLI.do on your computer or your cell phone, and enter that # El Monte HEU into the for the specific poll that we'll be conducting. And we're going to start off with the next couple of slides with a few warm-up polling questions. Next slide, Rachel. We want to hear from you, and some of the things we want to know are how did you hear about this workshop? That'll help us also for future efforts to tailor our notification about community engagement events. So we have the City of El Monte websites, local organization, maybe from Facebook or the farmer's market or some other options. So far, it looks like other is the main response. Maybe it's from your friends and neighbors. And we'll also, for any other responses that you want to elaborate on, we can talk about that later in the meeting as well, because we'd like to hear about what's effective at getting the word out. And then the next question, we want to know if you've participated in any previous housing elements. Is this something that's familiar or is it something new? The housing element is required to be updated every 8 years. So you may have had the opportunity in previous cycles. Thank you. And as Rachel, is 5 the count that we want to target, or 6? We got 6 folks.
It was 5 last time, and it looks like there might be a couple folks that are sharing screens together. So I counted 11 folks on the call, but there might be a couple more that are actually in attendance.
All right, so we have a lot of first-time folks out of everyone that's responded. So this is the first time participating in a housing element update, and that's awesome news. I'm glad you're here. Another question we have, we'd love to hear your feedback on: do you rent, own a home, or a small rental, own a rental property within the city? Choose all that apply. Everyone's getting the hang of it really quickly. That's great to see. So that's great. Still some other responses that we can hear later on to clarify what that means. And we have some homeowners, some renters, some owners of residential rental property in the city. That's great. So I've got a couple more votes coming in. We'll also have this this presentation and this poll, the Slido poll up after the workshop. If you want to share it with your friends and neighbors as well, there'll be opportunities to participate. We also have a more expansive survey that's currently on the website that covers additional questions, and we encourage folks to take part in that survey as well. And that's on the city's website. We'll be providing some information on that. So this segment of the presentation, we want to give a little bit of background on the housing element. The housing element is one of the required elements of the general plan. The general plan is a state required document for each city and each county. And the housing element, as mentioned, it needs to be updated every 8 years. And we'll talk about more specifically of what the contents are, but it's one component of the general plan. And the general plan is really the overarching land use and policy document for the city and helping shape its future. Thank you, Rachel. As mentioned, it's one of 7 required elements of the general plan. It's the housing element assesses the city's housing needs and how best to accommodate existing and future housing needs is the focus. It's updated every 8 years. There's a deadline pursuant to state law of October 15th later this year. And then there's also a 120-day grace period that's available to invoke. The housing element update is reviewed by the state. That's the State Department of Housing and Community Development for its compliance with state law. You might hear HCD as an acronym later on in the presentation. And that's really the department of the state of California that reviews housing elements and ensures compliance with state law, and also provides certification if it meets those requirements. The benefits of making sure that the housing element complies with the state requirements and receives certification from HCD is that it ensures that it's a legally adequate housing element in courts in case it's legally challenged. It maintains eligibility for state housing funds and grants. It also the city doesn't face penalties, some of which can include additional housing obligations that are additive over time into the next housing cycle. And overall, compliance means that the plan provides a variety of housing options to meet El Monte's needs is really the larger goal. Thank you, Rachel. This slide describes the overall process for the housing element update. We have been digging into the housing needs assessment, and we are now drafting the housing element itself, as well as the safety element, which we'll touch on, which is a companion effort. And as you can see, we are here. We'll be preparing completing the draft housing element update and submitting it for state review. They have a 60-day review period in order to review and provide comments to the city regarding any modifications that are required in order to meet state law. And then adoption is planned for later this year, public hearings in this fall. And then the HCD then reviews the adopted housing element to make sure it's fully compliant. And throughout this process, there are outreach opportunities, and we'll touch on what some of the elements are of the community engagement process for this project. And the city then has, once everything is adopted, the element is certified, that the city has 3 years for implementation of any rezoning efforts. And then of course, the housing element covers the next 8-year period overall for any ongoing programs or policies would apply for implementation over the next 8 years. Thank you, Rachel. So outreach opportunities for the housing element update. We've had some stakeholder interviews with folks that are close to housing issues, such as community organizations working with special needs or housing issues, and folks also that build housing. and other organizations. We've launched an online housing needs survey, which we mentioned earlier, and here's the link on this slide. It's on the city's website, the housing element update page, and we'll have this up through there's an in-person workshop coming up on July 7th. So the online survey will be up through the 7th and probably about a week after that as well. We had a planning commission study session, and also we're conducting this virtual community workshop, and then we'll be having an in-person community workshop on July 7th. And the details are also on the city's website for that session. If you'd like to come in person and participate, again, it'll be largely the same material that we'll be presenting, but if that's an easier way to participate in the process, we welcome you at that session too. And also share the word with any friends or family or neighbors that are not able to attend tonight. Invite them and get it on their calendar for the July 7th evening date, and also encourage them to take part in this survey, since that will be an important part of collecting information on what we should be evaluating in the housing element update. And finally, as mentioned, we'll have public review of the housing element available prior to the adoption hearings planned for this fall. Thank you. So what is in the housing element? The housing element contents generally follow these components. There's an introduction and it provides a summary of the outreach process. There's a needs assessment component, which looks really at the demographic data for El Monte. What are the housing needs currently and projected? The constraints analysis looks at what are some of the impediments to providing housing opportunities. Maybe it's market conditions, maybe it's the cost of lumber, maybe it's the development review and approval process. What are some of the impediments to providing housing opportunities in El Monte? Also, resources and opportunities are described. A review of past accomplishments is required, which covers the past 8 years, the housing element that was prepared for the 2013 through 2021 time period. And lastly, the housing action plan. But more importantly, that's the key part of the housing element that will provide the sites inventory and where housing capacity can be accommodated. It provides the programs that are proposed by the city, including who's responsible, timeline, all the details, the roadmap essentially for implementing the goals within the housing element. Next slide. So a bit of a snapshot for the demographics and trends for El Monte today. This slide depicts the types of housing in El Monte today, the types of dwelling units, types of residences. And it's probably no surprise, but largely the most number of units are single family detached at about 16,000 and a half. About 55% of the housing stock in El Monte is a single family detached. In addition, there's single family attached, which is about 21%. Multifamily for smaller projects, 2 to 4 units, or multifamily developments that are 5 or more units make up a sizable proportion as well at 12 and 12.6% and 5.1%. And also mobile homes make up about 5% of the city's current housing stock. So that's just some background of how the current housing types are distributed for the city of El Monte. Next slide. So part of what the housing element is required to evaluate is required to evaluate housing opportunities for different income levels. And this slide depicts the different income categories as defined by the state. and it's based on a varying percentage of area median income. And the categories are extremely low, very low, low, moderate, and above moderate. And you can see the breakdown by percentage. There's a little under 30,000 dwelling units, residences in the city of El Monte. And you can see largely that there's about 27% of those at the extremely low income level and qualify for that. 21% qualify for the very low, 24% at low. So a lot of the income distribution is within those categories, and then 9% at moderate and 18% at above moderate. Housing is considered affordable if occupants pay no more than 30% of their income on housing costs. So that's good to keep in mind as well. Next slide. So this slide depicts some of the trends that we're seeing. There's been a bit of an uptick in total population from about 4.4% over the 2018 time period, an 8-year period. Household size has dipped a little bit, but generally stayed about the same. Or excuse me, yeah, dipped up. The arrow is down, but it's negative 2.2%. So pretty much very stable, the household size. For renters and homeownership, that renters have increased just by a small 0.5%, and homeownership conversely has reduced by 0.5%. So the split between renting and homeownership has stayed pretty stable too on a proportionate basis. One thing that we're seeing is that the fastest growing age group is the 55 to 64 age group has grown about 6%. So what we can take away from this is that these trends show a steadily growing population of older residents with fewer homeownership opportunities for younger families and households. Thank you, Rachel. So we have another polling question. Please identify the main housing challenges in the city of El Monte. Choose the top 3 challenges. So the first option is it a cost burden, meaning is it too expensive, essentially? Or the other option is are things in need of repair? Are there maintenance issues? Is that one of the top issues? Also, overcrowding, or is overcrowding an issue regarding as it relates to housing in El Monte? And also for fair housing, are there fair housing issues that things like segregation or discrimination of housing based on different reasons? And then we have another option. And this polling feature, you can see it in real time kind of shift what the forerunner is sometimes on the top responses. So it looks like the cost of housing is the number one concern based on the folks tonight responding to the poll. Overcrowding is second, and those are somewhat related. Maintenance is an issue, and fair housing has been identified, but not as one of the top issues, but still an important thing to look at. Oh, great. I think that might be it for this question. And this next question asks, which types of housing does El Monte need most? Choose the top 3. housing types. So it would be, is it accessible housing for folks with disabilities? Accessory dwelling units for ADUs, also commonly known as granny flats. Affordable housing for lower income households. Is market rate housing needed? Multifamily housing, homeless support, such as shelters or permanent housing, transitional housing. And this is good feedback. Thank you everyone for taking part in this. So the top selection for this poll, this polling question is affordable housing for lower income households is needed. And then multifamily housing and homelessness support, single family housing were also mentioned. Accessory dwelling units, there was some interest in that as well. Thank you, that sounds great. Thanks for your responses. So this part of the presentation, we wanted to provide a little bit of background on the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, or RHNA, as you may hear that term used. It's where each jurisdiction needs to demonstrate in its housing element that it can accommodate this its total RHNA number and its allocations by income level. The city must plan to provide capacity to meet this target. The city doesn't necessarily need to construct it itself, but we need to be able to provide a plan or sites or zoning capacity for accommodating that that number of dwelling units over the planning period of 8 years. So the Regional Housing Needs Assessment is established by the state of California, a total number, then that is distributed to planning agencies, regional planning agencies. And in this case, it's SCAG, or the Southern California Association of Governments, which covers a 6-county area. And for this 6-county area, there's a target of over 1.3 million dwelling units need to be planned over the next 8 years. That's further broken down by county, and for Los Angeles County, 812,000 approximately dwelling units must be planned for over the next 8 years. And then we provided the RHNA target for El Monte, and then also a few surrounding cities, nearby cities. For El Monte, the Regional Housing Needs Assessment allocation is 8,502 units. And as that is compared to some of the surrounding agencies, Rosemead has 4,612. Baldwin Park has has 2,001. West Covina has 5,346. And Pasadena has 9,429. And Temple City has 2,186. So it's just for context and what some of the other neighboring cities are also required to plan for over these next 8 years. Next slide. This slide compares the RHNA allocation applied to the last housing cycle, the 5th cycle, as it's called, from 2013 through 2021, to the current housing cycle, the 6th cycle, which is planning for 2021 through 2029. And it's broken out by income category, as we described earlier. And the last cycle, the 5th cycle, there was a total of 2,142 units. And with this current cycle, it's greatly increased to 8,502 units. And that's a common theme with the cycle for many of the surrounding cities. and the percentages are similar but slightly different based on what the state is determined to be the local need, and also some of the capacity. Having some transit-rich opportunities in El Monte is something they look at as well to help with that methodology. The methodology has changed over time, and that's one of the reasons why it's such a substantial number with this cycle. Next slide. Just to touch on briefly, what are the benefits of a diverse housing stock? And some of the benefits are that having a diverse housing stock provides housing for small and large families. It allows seniors to age in place, to stay in the community that they are familiar with and have connections. It provides housing for special needs populations, such as folks with disabilities and other needs. It provides housing options for young adults to stay in the community instead of needing to move out for housing to meet their needs. And it allows more residents to live and work nearby. Thank you, Rachel. So going back to the regional housing needs assessment and the allocation for El Monte, planning for 8,502 units over the next 8 years, we need to look at, the state requires that we look at specific sites where this additional housing capacity can be provided. So we need to look at sites different, whether it's sites that have an existing zoning that helps meet that goal, or maybe there's some new zoning classifications that can help meet that goal, or maybe there's some projects already in the pipeline that could contribute to meeting that RHNA target. So as part of this analysis, we identify and analyze specific sites that are available and suitable for residential development. Some of the questions we look at: does the zoning allow for a variety of multifamily housing types and densities? Are public facilities and services available? Are there environmental concerns or constraints that would make it feasible or infeasible? We look at making sure that there's sufficient capacity to address the housing needs for all income levels as designated and broken out by the RHNA allocation. And then some of the strategies for addressing the sites that are needed. We want to look and make sure that it meets the overall city vision for the future of the city. Also, accessory dwelling units are a component that can help meet the regional housing needs allocation. And then also redevelopment opportunities for sites that may have some development on them now, but maybe they're older structures or they're underutilized in some way. And then lastly, the religious institution sites. It's a new opportunity through recent state legislation, and we'll touch on that in a slide as another avenue to help contribute meeting the housing targets for the next 8 years. Next slide. We look at the existing land use categories. This is a snapshot of the existing El Monte general plan, and some of the existing categories that allow for residential development include categories for low density, medium density, medium low density, high density, mixed multi-use, downtown core, El Monte Gateway specific plan, all have varying allowable densities. And pursuant to the state, that the default density that can be considered for helping meet the lower income housing needs is 30 dwelling units per acre. So that's an important number for helping meet the criteria for lower income categories. Next slide. So for some of the sites, inventories, accessory dwelling units is one strategy, and El Monte has a pretty good track record for the last 3 years of permits that have been issued for accessory dwelling units or granny flats. And based on the average number of units per year, we can project out about 44 units per year into the future on average over the next 8 years. And that could contribute over 350 units toward meeting the housing capacity obligation. And a good percentage of that would be classified as lower income pursuant to already adopted pre-approved methodology. And in addition, there's new state legislation that allows for congregational sites, for churches and other religious institution sites, that there is the opportunity to utilize excess area, maybe parking. And this new state legislation does not require replacement parking. So there are some incentives for potentially looking at congregational sites where they have available land for residential uses, and perhaps it aligns with their mission and values. There's about 51 congregational sites in El Monte, and looking at different characteristics, maybe about 17 sites could be good candidates for this approach, and could also help be a part of the overall strategy to help the regional housing needs target. Next slide. So we've wanted to share just some of the general areas that we're looking at for additional housing opportunities. And this map, we've broken the city into two parts. This is the northern portion of the city of El Monte, and we're looking at some of the corridors and some of the downtown and gateway areas for potential sites, and coming up with a scenario of how many sites, the number of dwelling units that could be provided, and what tweaks to the zoning would help provide more opportunities to meet the RHNA goals. Area 1 is Flair Park, kind of an industrial park characteristic. Also the gateway specific plan. Area 2, downtown, and Santa Anita Avenue, as well as Peck Road, and also Ramona Boulevard have some opportunities for additional housing capacity. Next slide. For the southern portion of the city, we're looking at Garvey Avenue corridor, the 5 Points area, Durfee Avenue, and then not specifically shown, but we are also looking at other single family, multifamily sites, as they may make sense throughout the city if they're vacant or underutilized, and also some of the larger residential parcels that may have a single family home on it, but could be large enough to subdivide and provide additional units, maybe 1 or 2 additional units, if that makes sense. Making sure strategies are compatible with existing neighborhoods is also a key factor. Next slide. So we wanted to share just a single site opportunity, just to walk through some of the thought process on how we're evaluating different sites in the city. This particular parcel is off Grand Avenue and Santa Anita Avenue in the northern part of the city. It's currently zoned M1 light manufacturing. It's a little over 3 acres, and it's close to housing, existing housing, and retail uses in schools and restaurants. And there have been some past inquiries and interest from the development community, so it may be a good candidate for being feasible. And this potential site could be a good candidate possibly for a general plan amendment and a rezone from the industrial business park designation to a high density residential classification of R4. So that's one possibility that we're looking at, the type of analysis that's being conducted. Next slide. Another question. Where would you like to see additional housing for El Monte? Please choose all that apply. So the options are existing neighborhoods along major streets, older shopping centers and retail areas, city-owned properties, and also accessory dwelling units. Again, granny flats, is that another strategy that should be pursued? Where should some of these additional housing opportunities be explored? That's good. Any more responses? Good, well, thank you. It looks like city-owned properties is the most popular response by a little bit, and it's really publicly owned properties. There aren't a lot of options in this category, but that is something that we're looking at. Older shopping centers and retail areas. I think that's another top contender, and that's somewhat reflective of the changing market where folks, in-person shopping is fading a little bit in popularity, and we might have some vacant retail areas or underutilized retail areas. Existing neighborhoods, also some strong support for that along major streets, which is what we've been looking at along some of the corridors. And then, yes, accessory dwelling units is a good tool as well, a good strategy for providing another layer of opportunity. So we just have a couple slides on the safety element. And it's also a required element of the general plan, one of the 7 elements that's required. And SB 379 requires update of the safety element at the time of the housing element is updated. If it hasn't been updated, it's more of a focused update to look at very specific issues related to climate warming and disadvantaged communities. We have a little bit more on this slide. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It addresses a variety of natural and human related hazards, seismic and geologic and soil, flood, wildfire, public safety and emergency management, hazardous materials. And for this effort, it's largely related to climate change, adaptation and resilience, making sure that there are some policies in the general plan addressing that topic. And it contains goals and policies aimed at reducing the risk associated with these hazards is the general purpose of this. It's a pretty focused update. Thank you, Rachel. Just a couple of polling questions for you. Have you or someone in your household experienced any of the following? Select all that apply. Crime, drought, extreme heat, earthquakes, wildfire, heavy rain and flooding. Today might be a popular response for extreme heat. I know it's pretty warm in a lot of spots, a lot of heat warnings. Responses are still coming in. I think that's, and then we got one more. Earthquakes as well. So it looks like extreme heat and earthquakes are the top contenders, with crime and drought And then also some folks aren't affected much by some of these issues. And wildfire, no responses on that one, or heavy rain or flooding. Any other takers? Looks good, thank you. And I think this is our last polling question. And this one asks, during power outages, high electricity use can cause power blackouts. What do you do in response to power blackouts, and what are some of the challenges you may face? What are some of the challenges you may face during a blackout? The responses are, you don't need to do anything, or use non-electrical devices during that time. Do you rely on a medical device that requires power? Are you concerned about having no way to receive news or information? Also having not having an ability to call for help, or just wait for the power to come back on. Or maybe it doesn't affect you because you have a backup generator or your own power source. Or some folks, they leave the house and go to a friend or family member's home where electricity is available. So just wanted to get a feel for what some of the experiences are relating to blackouts and electricity use in those circumstances. Great, yeah, wait for the power to come back on. It's the top response. Or use non-electrical devices, or go to a friend or family's house where there is available electricity. And also some other responses on the other topics. Concern with not receiving news, and also not being able to call for help. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you all. So for next steps, we'll be proceeding with wrapping up the sites inventory analysis. We're completing the draft housing element update document and housing programs. We will have a future community workshop on July 7th. As mentioned, the details will be provided on the city's website. And we will be submitting the draft housing element for review by the state Housing and Community Development Department for the 60-day review period this summer. And then public hearings will be conducted this fall. And if you have any questions or comments, Tony Boo, Senior Planner with the City of El Monte, who introduced our workshop tonight, feel free to reach out to him and he'll share your comments and questions with the team. And we invite you to follow up if you have other thoughts beyond tonight. Ongoing input is welcome. And feel free to visit the city's website for updates. And the link is provided on this page for any updates, and the draft housing element, when it's available, will be available on that website. And feel free to share your email address or contact information with Tony for being on the list for any updates or notifications for future activities or review of the housing element itself. So that ends our presentation and our polling exercises. And now we wanted to have more of an open-ended opportunity for any additional comments that you'd like to share with us. And we have 3 questions that just to prompt any further thoughts that you may have. In thinking about the housing element update, what are the primary issues that we should be considering? What areas or sites should we consider for future housing opportunities? And are there other issues that we haven't covered that you feel are important for the housing element update? So we're going to provide the opportunity. You can raise your hand or unmute your mic. Rachel will be bringing up a a document where we'll be typing in responses and comments as they're received this evening. And yeah, we can get started now. Anyone that wants to raise their hand or unmute their microphone to provide comments.
Is it possible to speak?
Yes, Ted, go for it.
Thank you. It's good to see you guys this evening. It's a shame we couldn't get together in public. I'm here, Ted Jimenez, representing on behalf of the Southwest Regional Council of Carpenters. And I see that there's a lot going on here, which is beautiful for El Monte. But what I'd like to relate to you is a message from our regional council. And this message is on behalf of the Regional Council of Carpenters. We submitted this paperwork to Tony, so it's there. But I wanted to make sure it goes on record and be recorded that, I represent over 55,000 members in 6 states, over 35,000 here in Southern California alone. And of course, we have residents who live in El Monte, over 300. And, we'd like to see implemented here policies. There's an opportunity here to create housing policies. The idea of lifting people out of poverty within our own community and being able to provide an opportunity for livable wages and healthcare within the community is here. And the housing policy that can be drafted, right, that can be worked on to include opportunities for people who are looking for jobs coming out of a pandemic, our members, including the building trades of hundreds of people who actually live in El Monte, to not have to drive so far from home to look for work in their own city and be very proud to build their own city, right? I want to make sure that that the carpenters are represented here today to let you know that this is an opportunity right now to create those policies and to create community wealth, to add to your policy an opportunity for individuals to get into a middle-class wage career, to be able to have healthcare and benefits, jobs and wages that are lifting from poverty, not building for poverty, but lifting people out of poverty, changing the renters, right, into homeowners, keeping them from leaving El Monte so they can buy. The way to do that is to partner with the trades, partner with carpenters. We are professional policy writers, and we want to make sure that you, as El Monte, are provided with skilled, trained, certified workforces that are certified by the state of California and are recognized by the state of California, because you guys deserve the best, right? The local skilled, trained, and workforce requirements and policies are significant, especially when it comes to the environmental benefits. Since they improve the area's jobs, housing balance, decreasing the amount of the length of job commutes, right? Keeping that they're able to be home early, not have to be in traffic driving so far for work, being able to spend more time with their loved ones. The cities, increasingly are developing these policies and being able to provide for local hire, disadvantaged workers, veterans, that sort of thing. These are the things that you can implement in your policies to be able to provide for the El Monte's community to thrive. And we have the full email that is sent to Tony, and I encourage you to not only read it, but we ask you that you put it in the, in the record. And I really appreciate your time. Thank you for tonight, and take care, everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you, Ted. Yes, we're writing down your comments. And also this session is being recorded, so that'll be available as a record of tonight's meeting as well. And appreciate your comments. Anyone else that would like to provide some input on the issues that we should be addressing for the housing element update, or things that we haven't covered tonight that are important?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Isaura. I'd like to make a few comments. I've been a resident of the city of El Monte for 26 years. I've been here, grew up, born and raised. And I am now, I'm considering trying to help my family become homeowners. They've been renting all their life here, and it's been incredibly frustrating to know that a lot of the housing opportunities available for affordable housing, just in general, is not quite there. And as a family, we would want to stay here in El Monte. This is where we grew up. This is home for us, right? And so I think part of this new development should really focus on trying to help existing families become first-time homeowners, and try to have a set of funds and programming and development to create educational information for them to become that. But while that is also one of the issues, I guess, that I'm realizing, another one is concerning rental apartments and existing units here in El Monte. I believe there's a lot to be done too to offer support for renters, mostly trying to repair and fix there's certain living conditions that are available, making sure landlords are being held accountable to offer safe living conditions. And I think I would like to see more of a conversation about maybe a rental ordinance, rent control, possibly in the city, to help families stay housed and avoid homelessness, or it can act as a preventative measure to help families in need to stay housed, to avoid overcrowding. I think it'll be a good start, and it'll be really good if the city and the housing development can take that into consideration. And another point that I have is, as the new development housing conversations are starting, I think it's also equally important to create green spaces for the city. So as new developments are starting up, making sure that that there's also parks and recreational areas where families and people can just live and enjoy themselves. So yeah, those are 3 points that I'd like to share, and I hope it offers some some pointers for conversation and for implementation of these issues. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, that was a lot in those comments. So we're taking a lot of notes. Thank you so much. Anyone else that would like to?
Looks like Richard has
Sure.
their hand up.
Richard?
Richard, would you like to go ahead and unmute?
Oh, maybe it's accidental.
Can you hear us?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you. Yep. Go ahead, Richard.
Right on. Great presentation, great information. I've been taking pictures of the screen, and I'll be able to look at that stuff later. My name is Richard Burns. I'm a resident of El Monte, and I'm a professional union carpenter. I have for many years been involved working to help build the thriving El Monte community. I want to express that what El Monte needs is a stable, progressive city council to install policies, housing policies that brings responsible developers and contractors, including a skilled and trained workforce with a California state approved apprenticeship that will partner with the city and building trades. A community workforce agreement that will include housing policies that will also provide opportunities for local hire, disadvantaged workers, local veterans to obtain careers, but coming out of the pandemic to provide opportunities for those who have lost their jobs. Yes, I understand that some of these jobs aren't for everybody, but we as carpenters already have 300 residents in El Monte, and that we also have other building trades that live in the city of El Monte also, I'm sure. We would like to provide a chance for them to work close to home, which will allow our construction men and women with mental wellness of spending greatly needed time with their loved ones at home and at kids' events, and not stuck in traffic with strangers, frustration, returning from a long drive at home. The renting percentage is high. We'd like to give opportunities for people to own homes. And this is one way for you as the building community wealth and change the renters into homeowners. Knowing that there is a requirement to build over 8,500 homes within the next decade here in El Monte, I know together we can create a thriving community by lifting those from low wage and no benefits to a proud middle-class wage earning with who will be able to afford and remain here and buy here in the great city I call home, El Monte. We'd like to thank you for everything you do.
Thank you, Richard. Good comments. We have another hand raised, Sammy.
Yes. Hi, this is Sammy Lau, and I am a local resident in the El Monte, and I want to say thank you for inviting us to participate in this meeting. I come with a couple of questions because I'm a part of a religious organization, and we have recently received a letter pertaining to the zoning situation, which has been, our institute has been considered to be a potential area for the affordable housing project. And the question that I have for this is that for the owner of the area or our institute, is it an option for us to continue on with the project, or can we deny it, or it's a project that we don't have an option to say yes or no to because it is within our organization's zoning area, and since that it is classified as a potential zoning area for the affordable housing, we just want to know what are the details in terms of religious sites that are under that zoning situation.
Right. No, I'm glad you asked, Sammy. And right now there's nothing predetermined at this time. It's just an option that's being explored. And many cities that are looking at this opportunity, it can be an overlay zone if it does move forward, where it is an additional voluntary option where it wouldn't be, it's not envisioned to be a mandatory requirement to provide housing on these congregational sites. It would just be an additional opportunity, most likely. It hasn't been written, and it would also be an implementation action if it is something that is deemed a good strategy for the city of El Monte, that following the adoption of the housing element, within those next 3 years, there would be a review and adoption process where there are more details that would be provided and more outreach and review opportunities to see if any sort of rezone, any change in the zoning, if it makes sense, and it could be refined. So there's nothing in place right now, but just is it a good opportunity? And in many cities, it's offered as an overlay zone, meaning that it doesn't affect the current zoning on the site. It would just be an overlay, an additional opportunity that can be invoked by the property owner as an option. It wouldn't be it's not envisioned to be a mandatory requirement.
Okay, thank you. And another question is, if it does have the overlay for that, and should the owner decide to maybe do a little bit of a development in the back for some housing, how does that work? Would that be a city monitored area, or a area monitored by the ownership of the property?
It would be under the control of the property owner and whoever develops the housing. It wouldn't be it wouldn't be any different than any other housing development per se.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
Yeah, good questions. I don't know, as city staff, if you guys want to add it on to that question, but that's a little bit of background on what that could look like.
Sure, I did want to add on to that last comment, Diane, about the overlay zone. So if we were to create like an overlay zone for the property or for church properties, the city would also come up with regulations when it comes to like setbacks, parking requirements, and floor area ratio, things like that. And
On the development
property,
standards.
the proposal would need to comply with all of those requirements to develop certain housing. But that process, as Diane mentioned, is later on after the, I guess, the housing element when it's adopted. Then we have that 3-year implementation process, and that's when we would develop the overlay zone.
Yep. Thank you, Tony. Any other comments or things that we should be considering or questions?
Hi, just a quick question. Is there a deadline for when the housing survey should be submitted? Do you know?
Housing survey, is that what, sorry. Yeah, the housing survey will make the polling questions available as a follow-up to tonight's meeting. But the overall, the expanded survey, it'll be up through at least July 7th and probably about a week after that. So there's still time to participate in the larger survey. And we would encourage, if you haven't participated in that survey, please do. It's linked on the city's website. But yeah, it'll be about a week after the next in-person workshop. We'll leave it up for any folks that come to the workshop or get wind of the process. We want to make sure that there's ample opportunity to participate.
Okay, great. And then just a follow-up, is there any way that the survey can be done without an email? I know a couple people who might not be tech savvy or have access to an email, and so I would really appreciate if like the community input is that their voices can be heard. So I'm wondering if there's any way that can be changed, or other option for them to fill the survey.
Right. If there's not access to a computer or a cell phone, that I believe there are copies available at City Hall, and Tony can help provide you with more specifics on where those can be found, or maybe they can be mailed out to you, or I would contact Tony for any specific arrangements for hard copies of the survey, and he can help you out.
Okay, great, thanks.
Definitely. Yeah. And we're now open to the public, so we allow walk-ins, and if you did want to take the survey, didn't have access to technology to do so, we can also assist you here at City Hall, do the printouts, or help you on your device fill out the survey as well.
And I did want to mention that the survey is available in Chinese, Mandarin, as well as Spanish and English. So it's available in 3 languages. So if you have any friends or neighbors that need a different language, that's available as well. Great, good input. Thank you, and good questions. Anyone else for tonight? We're getting close to like the 7 o'clock, but I think we're doing great on time. So any other thoughts? And if you think of something later, again, feel free to reach out to Tony. There's a lot to digest. And if you have questions or think of other things that we should be considering or specific sites that we want to look at for housing opportunities, we encourage you to follow up. It's not just tonight's meeting. And we also have our public workshop in person on July 7th. So other opportunities to contribute. We really appreciate it. I think unless I see anyone else wanting to share their thoughts, I think that's it for tonight. Tony or Jason, do you have any last remarks you want to share? Or we can.
I'm muted. No, I just want to thank everyone for participating, and as well, especially the people who are assembled in the rooms with the signs. That's totally cool. And, you know, just also help spread the word out for other people to attend the in-person workshop. You know, definitely community input is a very important component of this document, and we want to make sure that it's something that, you know, isn't just, you know, reflects staff or the city council's ideas, but also goes to the community for people who've lived here, and especially people who've lived here for many years, if not their lifetime. So thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone. I think we're gonna close the public workshop tonight. And again, reach out if you think of anything else, but really appreciate you spending time with us and the good input that you've provided. We're grateful for that. Thank you very much. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.